When I was alone with Miss Lewinsky on certain occasions in early 1996 and once in early 1997, I engaged in conduct that was wrong. I regret that what began as a friendship came to include this conduct, and I take full responsibility for my actions. What they wanted to do, and what they did do, and what they had done by the time I showed up here, was to find any negative information they could on me, whether it was true or not, get it in a deposition, and then leak it, even though it was illegal to do so. But it was not my responsibility in the face of their repeated illegal leaking. It was not my responsibility to volunteer a lot of information. You have made it the most important issue in America.
Today begins the new fall TV season. The most watched show may be the president's tape. How do you rate the president's testimony? Thumbs up or thumbs down? We'll talk to Paula Jones attorney John Whitehead and former Watergate attorney David Dorsen. Then you be ready to talk back. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talkback Live, CNN's interactive talk show. I'm Bobbie Battista. Well, the tapes rolled today, and the entire world got a rather intimate and unprecedented look at the President of the United States. What do you think? We're going to take a quick poll of the audience members out here today. Ann, go ahead.
Oh, well, I thought he was a master of semantics and shirking of personal responsibility.
John?
I thought he was very lawyerly. He handled himself well, however.
What do you mean by lawyerly?
He was very careful with his the choice of words. He works well with words, and he's very careful with the words he uses.
Elon?
I think it's a sad day in American history when the President of the United States has to expose a grand jury testimony. I think the whole purpose of this was to get his ratings down in the polls, but I don't think they've been successful with that.
All right, let's start with our guest now. John Whitehead is an attorney for Paula Jones and the president of the Rutherford Institute. The Institute is paying Ms. Jones' legal bills. Also, David Dorsen is with us. He was chief counsel to the Senate Watergate Committee. He also writes the Scandal Watch column for The Hill, a Capitol Hill weekly. Welcome to both of you. David Dorsen, let me start with you. Your thoughts. How did you think the president looked? How did he come off?
Well, we have to keep in mind the context. We're not talking about a campaign promotional video. We're talking about a very bad situation for the president. And given that context, I think he did better than most people thought he would. And I think that the expectation created by the leaks was that this would be devastating. I don't think it was devastating. Also, I think the question for the House Judiciary Committee basically is going to include crimes committed by the president. Did the president commit perjury, obstruction of justice? I used to be a prosecutor and I was listening very, very carefully. I don't think they're going to be able to prove criminal misconduct in the form of perjury or obstruction of justice that would hold up in a court of law. And the House Judiciary Committee is composed mostly of lawyers, many former prosecutors and defense attorneys, and I think they're going to see that this is not going to fly as a prosecution, and that's going to weaken their resolve to go ahead with impeachment.
John Whitehead, I would assume you see that differently.
Well, how I see it is how it relates to our case and all the evidence that we've seen and the documents. I think if you actually take the president's words and you put them on the screen and you read those words, you read them out of the Starr report, they look a bit different when you compare them to statements he made in the deposition, for example, the Paula Jones case, and what he said to the grand jury. We often see two different statements made. As far as whether or not he committed perjury, we do think he perjured himself, obviously, because he said he didn't remember being alone in a room with her, and now he admits that obviously he was. Whether or not he had sexual relations, she says on 10 occasions they had intimate touching on both sides. So to us, obviously, it's perjury, and it may also go to contempt. Judge Wright raised that issue on September 1 in an order where she said that she hadn't decided whether or not she may hold him in contempt. So there's still some other things out there also, such as the campaign financing problem, maybe some whitewater, I don't know. So whether or not that all gets in the mix, it becomes a political thing sooner or later as far as whether or not he will be impeached or they hold impeachment hearings.
All right, gentlemen, stand by if you will. Let's find out how all of this is playing on Capitol Hill. We're joined by CNN correspondent Bob Franken. And Bob, although the House is not in session today, that doesn't mean there's not a fair amount of reaction from up there.
The cameras do draw people, don't they? The members are pretty much saying what they said before. The ones who supported the president before feel that he acquitted himself acceptably, that he didn't hurt himself that badly, and those, of course, who are against him, meaning the Republicans, say that this was really devastating to the president. In other words, the reaction has been very predictable. Now, the one thing that was interesting about this, Bobbie, is that we really didn't learn much new. There have been so many leaks over the months that the information that was in there was out, his demeanor was out. We've heard this all before. So if part of this was to be a surprise where people were to say, wow, I didn't know that, there wasn't that aspect at all.
Bob, how much talk is there after the tapes now about the possibility of political backlash?
Well, this was also not as outlandish as many people would think. Frankly, the more graphic material is in what everybody is reading right now, the 3,000 pages plus of documents that accompanied the videotape. That includes, of course, the transcript of this tape, but it also includes Monica Lewinsky's testimony twice before the grand jury, and the most graphic material, which was in a private deposition she gave to the independent counsel's prosecutors. There are very specific, very graphic, more importantly, very, very specific contradictions of what the president had to say in his taped testimony before the grand jury. The problem will be if this becomes a he said, she said situation.
Well, we should also point out at this point, Bob, too, that this is only one side of the story, what we saw today from the president on tape.
Absolutely. This is, in effect, the prosecutor presenting his case for trial. Of course, the analogy breaks down there because this is not the perfect trial as you would look at it in the judicial sense. Now we're going in the impeachment process. There is a political aspect to this, so never mind the legalities. How is this going to play with the voters, the American people, and the members of Congress in a political sense? That's just as important as the legalities.
All right, Bob Franken, thanks so much. Good to see you as always. We'll be checking in with you again, I'm sure, in the days ahead. Let's check what's going on the internet now. John, our internet watcher.
A lot of the chat going on right now is it's going to be a backlash for the Republicans in the November elections because it's a mistimed release of the tapes.
Let me have our two guests comment on that before we go to break.
Well, the one problem the Republicans could face is if it doesn't become an issue of whether they like Clinton or don't like Clinton, but whether they want to see Clinton removed or not see Clinton removed. If that becomes the referendum issue in the election, the Republicans may have a problem because most of the public, at least as of now, seems to want Clinton to stay in office, however flawed and disgraceful his personal conduct was.
John? John?
Well, I think that what we're going to see played out here, and again, I think it's a very, very political thing, is it's always been in Congress. So what it's going to come down to in terms of the human side of it and what the people see is not just this performance today, but all the other witnesses that testified. What we saw today was one small part of a large whole. There were 75 witnesses that testified here. And again, Monica Lewinsky has some very, very graphic things to say. And of course, Betty Currie said very clearly that she thought the president was coaching her to possibly obstruct justice. So there's a lot more out there, plus the Paula Jones case is on appeal, and that's set for oral argument on October 20th. So things are moving ahead on all sides against the president.
All right, still ahead, we will talk more about the president's tape today. We'll also check in with Richard Roth at the United Nations, where the president gave a speech today. You might be surprised at the reaction there. We'll be back in a moment. And welcome back to Talkback Live. Some quick faxes and internet messages that are coming in from Darren. The American people voted Clinton into office. We continue to support our president. Judge Starr wasted our tax dollars and abused his power. Kathy from Louisiana says, as a Democrat who supported President Clinton, this is a sad day. I don't have to be a lawyer to recognize a lie and legal game playing. And an internet message. If I were Clinton, knowing the video is going to air today, I would have resigned last night. It is a disgrace to have him meeting with world leaders today. And speaking of that, those world leaders are having to decide whether it was live or taped today because some television sets at the United Nations were keeping track of the president's taped testimony, while others were tracking the president's live UN address. So what were they watching? CNN senior United Nations correspondent Richard Roth joins us from the United Nations. And Richard, they saw two faces of Bill Clinton today.
Yes, we've heard often about these alleged two faces of President Bill Clinton. In a way, they were on display here at the UN, but you might say on different floors. First, let's take the General Assembly appearance by President Clinton. He had a chance to perhaps observe a television monitor on his way into the General Assembly Hall, but that monitor was turned to the General Assembly rostrum. He received a surprise, rare standing ovation by the delegates of the 185 nations of the UN. The president thanked the delegates after receiving the standing ovation, and about an hour ago when he entered the General Assembly Hall for a lunch, he said to a CNN question, he said that he was touched by that standing ovation. Many of the delegates here have problems with the position, the political position taken by the United States here at the UN. Washington has not paid $1.4 billion in money owed to the UN yet. Many of those delegates stood up, and according to the president of Lithuania, he told CNN that the ovation was more for the man himself. There was a separation between Bill Clinton, the man, and President Bill Clinton. The Philippines foreign minister said he has a personal problem he has to face, but that the UN gave him a show of sympathy and support. Now, upstairs, 1 or 2 floors above the General Assembly Hall, mostly journalists here at the UN, were kind of torn between what to watch. There were several television sets tuned to the appearance by President Clinton in front of Ken Starr's grand jury and the Ken Starr's prosecutors. The journalists watched President Clinton. Sometimes there were some arguments about what should the television set be on. You have a lot of journalists who flew in here from out of town. Bobbie?
Richard, let me ask you a question, because I know in the course of doing this show, we've had an awful lot of people here who wonder and worry about how this is playing overseas and how it is playing with other world leaders. Was there any evidence at all today that this was some sort of weakening or humiliation of the president or the United States?
Not publicly. No leader referred to the U.S. scandal in remarks in front of the General Assembly. The Philippines foreign minister did tell us, quote, sometimes one may wonder about President Clinton's ability to lead, but this is sort of on the margins. Basically, a lot of the countries here want to see a strong U.S. They may condemn them publicly for internal domestic consumption, but they believe the U.S. is still the biggest military power here, biggest financial supporter of the UN. They need a strong U.S. They're troubled by this. You heard earlier on CNN comments attributed to President Kohl of Germany saying that the whole issue makes him want to throw up. The French foreign minister also condemning what's going on in the U.S. And that Philippines foreign minister said this is an inquisition that's going on. But by tomorrow, I think the focus will be on many of the world problems, terrorism, the financial problems going on. I think the delegates will be back to focusing on that, but they'll still keep a little bit of an eye on Washington.
All right, Richard Roth at the United Nations, thanks so much. And another internet message to CNN. The president's testimony is being broadcast here in Europe. The U.S. is a worldwide laughing stock. In England, the prime minister would have resigned long ago, and in France, they couldn't care less. Jane, you had a comment.
Well, it's not a question of what's acceptable to the rest of the world. We elected this man. He's accountable to us. It's what is our acceptable code of conduct.
Let me get both of our guests in on that, as well as some phone calls. Go ahead, David.
Well, I think, first of all, we have to keep in mind that the president was elected and that many of the people who are most vociferous in criticizing him excuse me, are those who voted against him. This is not a re-referendum. This is a question whether the president violated the Constitution by abusing his Article 2 powers as President of the United States, as I see it. And unless he did that, I do not believe he's subject to impeachment. And I don't believe that the House of Representatives would impeach him or the Senate convict him unless he's shown to do that, especially if the public continues agreeing with the way he's conducting his office. And unless this causes a big shift in public opinion, I think the status quo is going to remain. The president will be, his conduct will be deplored, but he will remain president.
All right, let me take a phone call from Kansas, and then John, I'll get to you. Anna from Kansas is on the phone with us. Anna, you're a Republican, but you say you're not so sure you're going to vote Republican now.
No, I'm not. What I've been seeing, I'm just very disgusted with. And I am a Republican. I've been a Republican all my life, but I'm not voting for a single Republican candidate in November. I don't believe the Republican Party and how they're acting in Congress has any honor. And I think they've wanted to change the presidency ever since he was elected, and they couldn't do it through the election process, so they used Ken Starr to do it. And the president made a mistake, and what he did was wrong, but it wasn't wrong enough to get rid of him through impeachment.
John Rutherford, a lot of people may be wondering why these tapes were released to the public and why the president's testimony was even taped to begin with. John Whitehead, I'm sorry.
Well, why? He obviously agreed to have it taped, and I think as we're seeing the reaction of some people, President Clinton's a master in the age of television and video, so he obviously does well on those things. But to get back to an issue that was raised, I think it is a question of rule of law, and the question here is ultimately going to go, did the president violate the law? But also, I think a question that we have to raise, and all the viewers have to think about this, when we elect a person to the presidency, are we electing merely an administrator, a bureaucrat, just to push programs through, or are we electing someone we think is going to give proper moral leadership to the country, to the children that watch how the president acts? Is it acceptable that our president would have sex with a 22-year-old intern in the White House on 10 occasions and then lie about it? He lied about it to the American public. Is that something that Congress should look into? And if he's lied about it, is it a question of law? So I think it goes more than just to pure law. I think there's some really important things here. And he's supposedly the leader of the free world, and he should set an example. And I think many people believe that. Whether you agree with him politically or not, I think is beside the point.
John?
In response to the call, I hear a lot of this on the Sunday talk shows and in the office by the water cooler, and I don't think people are thinking about the election process completely. When we're talking about impeaching, what we hear is overturning an election, but what we're really not doing is overturning an election, because when you elect a president, you don't just elect a president, you elect a ticket. You don't throw Clinton out of office and tell Al Gore to pack his bags along with him. You elected a ticket, not just a president.
Leora?
Okay, I honestly think that Clinton should stay in presidency. However, he did during the Nixon presidency, when he was being impeached, did make a comment on how presidents should not have unlawful conduct and they should be penalized for their actions. And I do think he should take action for his words on what he does say. However, he does do a good job as a president when you do take that statement away.
Jane, hold your thought. We have to take a commercial break. When we come back, though, we'll continue our discussion with more reaction from America to the president's tape in a moment. Also released today were black and white photos of the gifts exchanged, photos of Lewinsky and Mr. Clinton in the White House, and FBI lab tests and a photo of the stained dress. Yesterday, President Clinton attended church for the first time since he admitted wrongdoing in mid-August. Welcome back. Interesting facts that came in during the break from Bill. It is obvious to me that Clinton's spin team let us think it was really bad, or it would be really bad, so he would look really good in comparison. Oh, let's not even go there. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about this tape with our two guests. And John Whitehead, I'd like to direct this to you, because it seemed that the president's whole MO during the whole thing was to constantly either blame the lawyers in the Paula Jones deposition for not doing their job, shall we say, for not following up, for missing opportunities in that deposition. And I wondered what your thoughts were on that. Were there some missed opportunities?
We didn't think so, because the president was asked a number of times, did he have a sexual relationship with Monica Lewinsky? Did he have a sexual affair? Did he have sexual relations? A number of other terms were used, and it was pretty clear to us what was meant. And then his lawyer went through it near the end of the deposition in order to rehabilitate the president, and read Monica Lewinsky's affidavit, where she categorically said, I had no relationship with the president whatsoever. And she was never attuned to that so-called definition that the president was using. So at the end of that, he was asked if that was true, and he said absolutely true. He didn't have any kind of sexual relationship at all with Monica Lewinsky. So again, we think he perjured himself, and it was very, very clear what was being said in that room.
Dennis from our audience, go ahead.
So I'd like to ask either one of the guests to explain the difference between lying under oath and perjury. I think the average American citizen knows the difference between a truth and a lie, but perjury is a little gray area. Could someone explain the difference between lying under oath and perjury?
Hi. I was a prosecutor and worked on some perjury cases, and there are a couple of technical requirements that it be material. But there's a famous case in which I actually worked at one point, the United States Supreme Court case involving Samuel Bronston, and he was asked, do you have any Swiss bank accounts? And his answer was, I have corporations that do. Well, he was indicted for perjury, and the Supreme Court held that his answer was literally true, so could not be perjury, however misleading and even approaching a lie. So perjury is a rather technical concept that requires a certain degree of evidence. It has to be material, and it is very hard to prove.
Good question, Dennis. Ann, you had a comment.
Yes, I wish people would lay off Ken Starr. He was only doing his job, and that's the way I see it.
Is there a thought, David, though, from you that Ken Starr was doing his job maybe a little too well, or was a little too obsessed with this?
I think so. As I said, I was a prosecutor. He went to the limits and beyond, sometimes subpoenaing Monica Lewinsky's mother, journalists, calling the Secret Service people who are protecting the president's life. I just think that he went into an extreme extent, given the fact that what he was dealing with was primarily alleged perjury in a civil case. It was not the Unabomber. So I feel he can be faulted. He did his job, but I think he did it too zealously, too well, and excessively, and spent over $40 million of the taxpayers' money.
Let's travel a bit to get some reaction now from the folks at the University of Miami, where we find CNN's Susan Candiotti talking to people there. Susan?
Yes, Bobbie, the crowd has thinned out here quite a bit since the videotape first ran, but we are here with a few people who did get to see a portion of it. First of all, I guess we'll interrupt the discussion, but that's why we're here. That's quite all right. Let's start with you, Jennifer. You're Jennifer over here. Jennifer, your impression of how the president handled the questions.
Well, I really definitely think he was evasive, and I don't appreciate that. I think that he should have answered the questions honestly. But overall, I think that this has been an issue where the Democrats went to say this is an issue about sex, that it's personal, so stay out of it. That way they don't have to deal with the political ramifications of it. But I really think it's an issue about truth from the Republican standpoint. You know, we want the truth to the public, we want the truth from the president, and if he didn't tell us the truth, then he needs to go.
Brian, you disagree with Jennifer over here. How come?
Well, I think that he's gotten a very important job as the president, and that he should be able to, lying to us was bad, but it might have been a good idea at the time. It was a bad move by all of his advisors and stuff like that, but I still think he should not be impeached because he's got too important of a job to be worrying about, this big scandal is going on, instead of worrying about the UN bombings and keeping in control of the country. He's just got a very important job, and he should be keeping going with that and forget about all this.
Teresa, you watched the tape as well, at least a portion of it, a good portion of it. Did it reinforce how you feel or change your mind about what should happen to the president?
It really didn't change my mind. I had made my mind up before, about the whole issue. The tapes that came out today, I don't think that they would really affect the way that anybody thinks on the issue.
You think that he lied, but you're on the fence as to what should happen to him?
Yeah, I can understand kind of why a person wouldn't, jump out and say that, yes, I committed adultery, but he did lie, but I don't know how to deal with that. Something should happen to him, but I don't know what. I think being a president is more important right now.
A little bit of political science and lively debate going on here at the University of Miami, and no extra cost, no added fee for this lively debate and a free political lesson in political science. I'm Susan Candiotti, CNN at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. More Talkback Live after this.
Join our Talkback Live discussion. Phone us at 800-310-4266. Fax us at 888-310-4FAX. Or go online at cnn.com/talkback.
And welcome back to Talkback Live. We are talking about reaction today, of course, to the president's taped testimony. This fax in from Carol in Texas. I am more supportive of the president today than ever before. I believe the media has lost its ability to report the news. Most are biased, and I have lost respect for them. We have not touched on the media's role in this so far, and both of my guests today, I know that when I was on vacation last week in the Boston area and was kind of watching television as a regular viewer, I was mind-boggled by the amount of coverage. And then, of course, I have to come back and be part of that. And I just wondered whether or not the two of you think that there will be a significant, whether the media will play a significant role in the way this thing goes, one way or the other.
Well,
my point of,
go ahead, John.
David, go first.
Go ahead.
Well, I think this is radically different from 1974. If we remember, Watergate made the media into heroes. People like Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were revered. Journalism schools shot up. Now it's just the opposite. The media are at an all-time low in polls. And I think there is a feeling, which is to some extent justified, I'm afraid, that the media care only about getting their faces on television and doing things like that, and are not interested in intelligent coverage, restrained coverage, or balanced coverage.
John, go ahead.
Well, to be very honest with you, I think that the media has been very good on this whole issue. Shows like this, we're not talking about Jerry Springer. Shows like CNN, the CNBC shows that I've been involved with, they've all been basically good shows, and they discuss the real issues. They have a wide variety of guests, and I'm a firm believer that without this, and without the media, without the great newspapers and CNN shows like that, we wouldn't know what was going on most of the time. And we can't forget that the White House has a very powerful spin machine, and they can manipulate things. And the press, in my opinion, has been very good at sifting out a lot of times what's true and not true. And whether or not that videotape should have played today is a whole different thing. But I think that the way the media has covered this generally, I've been very pleased with it.
Angela?
I'm frankly disgusted with it. I'm tired of the days of President Clinton's life, and it's absolutely unnecessary for it to be on television every day.
Nonetheless, we thank you for putting aside your personal thoughts and being on the show today to talk about this. All right. Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make the comment that as a foreigner whose country we see America in, it's got all this money, to spend $50 million on an investigation that is just going to get rid of someone, I don't know, as a process, is it like to restore any faith? It serves no purpose. If you impeach, what does it end up doing? I mean, you got to rebuild everything again. It strikes me as bizarre.
Stacy's on the phone with us from Colorado. She has the opposite opinion, I think. Stacy, you think the president should be impeached, right?
I do. The president's life affects us all. Myself, my family, and friends are all furious at the casual acceptance of this president's perjurous and scandalous behavior. Yeah, he should be impeached.
John wants to respond to Tim's comment as well. Go ahead.
Impeachment is not a practice of getting necessarily rid of someone or punishing someone. It is a process that enables the republic to continue to be able to govern itself. That's what it was in place for. It wasn't to punish or wasn't to destroy someone's life. It was put into the Constitution as a way of keeping the republic and the government itself governable. Removing someone through an impeachment process isn't a punishment or just trying to get rid of someone.
To my two gentlemen, can somebody provide us with a good definition of impeachment? And I know the founding fathers had trouble with that even.
Well, there is a problem. I mean, the Constitution says treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And James Hamilton and others defined it really as an abuse of the president's power when he's acting as president. It shouldn't be a referendum on moral suitability or personal conduct, however reprehensible. And that's not to say it should be excused, but we are talking about reversing an election. And it's now in the hands of 535 people, most of whom are Republicans, and we have a Democratic president. It's just too easy if you start talking about things like someone's private life or other things to reverse elections when the party out of power, who has power of Congress, can vote out the president. It should be very, very difficult.
Jane.
I think he had a very good point in his definition when he said that it's abuse of power. Wake up. Is this not it?
No, I don't think so. I think what we're talking about, abuse of power, is the power of the president as president. He was, assuming he lied or did things like that, that's essentially something that any individual, any one of us could be found guilty of having done. It is not abusing to any significant extent, unlike Watergate, the powers of office, and I think that's critical.
I think one thing we have to think about here is the people who wrote our Constitution, I don't think could ever have imagined the 10 sexual occurrences that happened in the White House. So when they were writing the Constitution, whether or not they were contemplating a president that would have sex with a 22-year-old intern is a whole different thing. And I think that impeachment's really there to protect the office of the president. That's its point. I think one gentleman said that. It's to remove someone that maybe the people do not want to have in the White House. So again, did our framers really imagine what we're seeing happening today? And what standard should we apply? And I think it's rule of law, but what is the standard?
Well, I think they did think of it because certain of the founding fathers had extramarital affairs, and no one ever suggested that would be grounds for impeachment. Certainly Thomas Jefferson had illicit sexual affairs, and no one ever talked about that in terms of impeachment.
But they didn't happen in the hallway of the White House, and then the president did not go into a deposition and those guys didn't go into a deposition and lie about it. So I think it's a different situation. Again, could they have imagined this? I would say, again, I don't think that the framers who wrote the Constitution imagined this type of conduct.
I guess we've proved our point on defining impeachment. Let's go back out on the road again. CNN correspondent Brian Cabell is at the Varsity, an off-campus restaurant near Georgia Tech here in Atlanta. Brian? Lunch hour over?
Yeah, lunch hour is over. A quick word about the Varsity for people who don't know much about it. It's probably the biggest fast food restaurant in the nation. A lot of TVs. You can watch sports here. You can watch news. You can watch soap operas. Most people were watching news today, and they were pretty attentive. Now, one of the gentlemen who's just walked in here in the last few minutes, as a matter of fact, Donald Jordan from Atlanta, you watched most of the president's testimony. You said you watched more than most people would watch. Any particular reason you were watching?
Well, I happened to be off work today and tuned in and just found it something that I should probably watch because it's important information.
Real quick, what were your impressions? How did he come across?
I thought he came across pretty cool-headed. I thought there was a lot less anger than I expected. I thought he was a bit evasive at splitting those legal hairs that I think was, for me, the biggest problem about the whole thing, was that he did seem to be saying on the one hand that yes, he had sex with Monica Lewinsky, and on the other hand trying to say I didn't have sex with Monica Lewinsky. And I think that, for me, that was the most negative aspect of the whole thing that came across.
Did your opinion of him change in any way?
No, it did not. I'm a supporter of the president. I'm pleased with the job he's done. I think that he's handled this rather badly, and I think he's maybe had some very bad legal advice. I don't think it's the first time that lawyers have maybe led somebody to say something that they wish they hadn't said later. But I think it has not changed my opinion.
Has the president or the presidency lost any dignity today, do you suppose?
Not today, I don't think. I think that politics in general have lost a lot of dignity over the past few years, but I don't think today did any more harm. I think maybe today, in fact, did a little bit of repair of the damage that had been done by some of the leaks and some of the testimony that's already come out.
The videotape was not as bad as you expected it to be?
Not at all, no. No.
Thank you very much. It's Donald Jordan, once again a resident and a customer here at the Varsity. The president, by the way, does have a history here at the Varsity. He was here, a couple of years ago. He sat down and had a slaw dog, I believe, and some onion rings, as most people are wont to do here. But again, this is a local spot for politicians to stop and visit, a must-see in Atlanta. In any case, Talkback Live will be back in just a few moments.
I'm Greg Lamont at Jerry's Famous Deli in West Hollywood here in Los Angeles, where this place does banner business for lunch every day. fact, they have several monitors up on the walls, as you can see up there. This morning, they've been showing all of the president's testimony that he gave the grand jury. And we decided we thought we'd come here and talk to some folks to see what it is they think about that taped testimony and, in essence, what they think about what's going on with the president. Sir, your view about what's been going on with the president. We've seen taped testimony today. Your thoughts about it?
Basically, I'm tired of seeing it on the news and listening to it on the radio everywhere I go. I turn on the TV and in my car. So that's basically it. I've had enough already.
There has been talk of, at least, impeachment. Do you think that that's where this country should go?
I don't think there's another way. I don't think there's any other way. I believe that has to happen.
Just moving down the line here. Sir, I'm wondering your thought about, there's talk in Washington now of the president's videotaped testimony. He's admitted that he deceived the country. Do we impeach the president?
I think they should. He's lied to the American public, and if anybody in any position would lie to a court, they'd be out, and I think he should be. And I think the tapes are showing his true colors. People can see that unless they're blind.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of opinions from Jerry's Famous Deli here in West Hollywood and the Los Angeles area. And we'll be going out throughout the day to talk to folks and see what they think about the president's videotape testimony today. Bobbie?
All right, Greg, thanks very much. And we have opinions flying here on the set of Talkback Live. Ian and John were really kind of getting into it here a few moments ago. And Ian, you started it, so...
I really wanted to direct my question to Mr. Whitehead. I want to know, is there a remote possibility that Monica could have been a plant? Could she have been, could this president have been set up? Everyone knew of his philandering ways. Could he have been set up? Monica saved a dress. I mean, should the FBI get involved to find out who was Monica? Where did she come from? Was this president set up for this?
I think the FBI has already been involved, probably, but whether he was set up or not, after reading the Starr report and what I've seen in the case, I'd say probably not. I think that she obviously had genuine affection for the president, and whether he had genuine affection for her, who knows. But as far as a setup, I think he just had two people that got into a pretty salacious thing here that's may cost the president his job. But as far as a setup, I don't see it unless it's really you have some kind of grand conspiracy theory, but that I don't think is there.
And John, and our audience takes issue with that as well.
Well, not necessarily taking issue with it. I'm saying, indeed, if that did happen, that is exactly why this is...
John, hold on just a second. Forgive